You're approved for drop.
Approved for the drop. 5 seconds. Green light on.
On April 13th, 2017, just after dark, modern warfare changed forever. When the United States dropped the largest non-nuclear bomb ever used in combat. The mother of all bombs. That day, the world found out that the arms race isn't just about nukes anymore. Because now, there are new mega bombs that can obliterate the enemy without destroying the world.
We're going to reach a point where the conventional weapons are just as seriously devastating as the nuclear weapons.
But the latest big bangs are nothing compared to what lies ahead.
Size still matters, but it's really speed, precision, and intelligence that have come to dominate.
The next World War will be fought with a high-tech arsenal ripped straight out of science fiction.
We are seeing the nations of the world gear up to fight in space.
Drones, and particularly swarms of drones, would keep me up at night.
Wow! Go big or go home.
These superbombs are the future of war, and that future is closer than you think.
We begin this hour with our historic breaking news out of Afghanistan. The U.S. has dropped a large bomb.
Is a large, powerful, and accurately delivered weapon. 11 tons of TNT in its warhead.
It has never been used in combat before.
Problem. Dozens of ISIS terrorists entrenched in a mountain cave complex. Solution. The GBU-43 Massive Ordnance Air Blast, better known as the mother of all bombs. 20,000 pounds of fire and fury falling from the sky.
Load clear.
There is no time to react.
It creates this tremendous concussion, which can kill people deep inside of a cave. The concussion will just, kind of turn their brains into mush and kill them on the spot.
Last night, U.S. forces Afghanistan conducted a strike against an ISIS-K complex in Achin District, Nangarhar Province, Afghanistan. The enemy used these tunnels and minefields to move around the battlefield and protect themselves from the attacks from Afghan and U.S. forces. This was the right weapon against the right target.
More than 90 terrorists were holed up in the compound. For weeks, they had beaten back Afghan ground forces attempting to flush them out. The Moab did the job in a split second. There were no known survivors. The blast ripped trees out by the roots, broke windows 1.5 miles away, and scorched homes and cars for half a mile.
You can't underemphasize the psychological effect. If you have a group of enemies bunkered down in a series of caves with the illusion of being protected, and you're able to strike them in this massive way, you're gonna really have a morale effect.
The Moab packs a serious punch with the explosive power of 11 tons of TNT. One Moab blast is equal to 22 Tomahawk missiles, like those dropped on a Syrian airfield in 2017. But unlike the Tomahawk, the Moab isn't designed to destroy structures. It's built to target people.
The Moab was designed specifically for soft target destruction, which means it literally was designed to take out large masses of troops.
If the Moab were dropped on a major city, like say, Seattle, it would wrap around the buildings and kill everyone standing outside for 3 city blocks.
What you would see is this wave coming down the street at very close to the speed of sound, destroying everything in its path.
Anyone standing within 30 feet of the impact would be incinerated. Those within 160 feet would instantly suffocate. and the blast would severely burn anyone up to 400 feet away.
Conventional weapons, when you think about what they do to people, is not a pretty sight. But that is the true nature of war. A lot of people think the modern war today is somehow surgical and precise, but war has always been a brutish, ugly business.
Declassified footage from the bomb's original test in 2003 captures the Moab's destructive force. It's programmed to detonate 6 feet above the surface. So the blast isn't muffled by impact with the ground. That's why it's called an air blast bomb.
Having the bomb burst in the air above the ground creates a concussion blast between the explosion point and the surface. And then when the concussion blast hits the surface, it spreads out. And that's how it creates such a large area of devastation.
Fine! In 3, 2, 1!
An air blast explosion happens in a blink of an eye. So how does it instantly annihilate human targets while leaving hardened structures mostly intact? To really understand the staggering physics involved, we have to slow it way down and see it up close.
I think this would be perfect for our demonstration.
So let's build a city and see how the city stands up to it.
Let's do it.
We're gonna try and put these in a grid pattern.
Well, that's the way a cityscape looks, right? There are alleyways, there's corners, cross streets, and that's what I would like to see, because I'd like to see what it does to a city.
Dr. Travis Taylor is an aerospace engineer who has worked on multiple defense projects with the Pentagon and NASA over the past 2 decades.
What I'd like to do, if we can, is maybe cut a few window spots and cover them with something soft like cellophane.
Right.
He's teaming up with pyrotechnic expert Bogdan Bushel to get an explosive look at the staggering power behind these super bombs.
We're going to look at how a Moab affects a cityscape. The Moab was designed as a surface blast type weapon to take out personnel and soft targets. We're going to set off a charge fairly close to the surface, and that charge is inside a container of fuel. It's diesel and gasoline. If you were a soft target standing in the midst of that, you wouldn't want to be there. Hopefully, we'll be able to determine from video afterwards how the concussion waves flow and see that this is what would happen if we had a real Moab in a real city.
We put in some windows like you asked for.
Yeah, that's
we've
great.
Got
and different heights.
And different heights so that you've got some stuff that's going to be directly exposed.
We're going to set our Moab simulator right here on this platform. And so when it explodes, the fire front is going to move out through each of these alleyways in every direction. There will be some of the energy that goes upward, but mostly should travel along the surface. I think it looks great. Let's set the explosive and see what happens.
Okay.
All right.
Get back to a safe place.
This is going to be a blast. Don't try this at home, kids.
Hot set! Hot set! In 3, 2, 1!
I saw some pieces of wood fly off. We've got a nice fire going. I bet it blew the windows out.
I think it blew the windows out.
Well, let's look at the high-speed video and see what it looks like.
Absolutely.
Wow. Oh, that's nice. And hey, you can see the cloud of the fuel spreading out.
And then it's chasing it.
Yep.
And it's doing exactly what you said. There's a cloud that's just
moving down
forward.
the alleyways, right?
And you literally see it going right up into the building, and it's bouncing off the building right there.
Right.
You can see it flying
Sure
up.
is.
And then a lot of that energy goes up in the air because it's directed by the ground and by the building structures as well.
All things considered, our simulated air blast did a bang-up job. Its concussion wave flowed evenly down the streets of the cityscape and would have instantly scorched and suffocated anyone within range.
Think about this on a scale. If a real Moab versus our simulation, our detonation explosive is about this big. It's big enough you could hold it in your hand. A real Moab is several pallets full of explosives. So if a real Moab were to land here on top of us, everything as far as we could see in each direction would probably be leveled.
The mother of all bombs is a lethal game changer indeed. But this isn't the Air Force's first rodeo. The U.S. has been dropping huge conventional air blast bombs for nearly half a century.
An awesome use of firepower, a 15,000-pound bomb. It is called the Daisy Cutter.
The Daisy Cutter was the Moab's massive predecessor, used in every major conflict since Vietnam. But it was all brawn and no brains.
When I fought in my war, we had nothing but dumb bombs. And so we occasionally took friendly casualties because we were really, really close to the enemy. And we had to have the bombs dropped, otherwise we were going to get annihilated. And we took a calculated risk.
The Daisy Cutter didn't have the GPS, global positioning satellite guidance, that a Moab has. So, you just had to get it in the ballpark. Not a lot of precision, but the blast compensated for the precision. That's the way weapons have evolved. In World War II, it took a 1,000-plane raid to destroy a large aerial target, where today, a handful of weapons could do that with precision. Off of one airplane.
The famous comparison is how many sorties did it take to take down a bridge in World War II, and today it's how many bridges can you take down with one airplane.
In the decades since the Daisy Cutter, American firepower has come a long way. But so have the other guys. And for the first time since the Cold War, the world's sole superpower has some stiff competition.
Back in the early 90s, there was an enormous margin of difference. Now, that margin of difference has gotten much, much smaller.
We have competitors out there that can do some real damage, not only against our military force, but also against the United States.
They're close enough to feel their breath on the back of our neck. We have work to do if we're going to stay ahead of our opponents.
One power in particular is hot on America's heels. Russia claims to have a bomb that dwarfs the Moab by a factor of 4.
The Russian military has dubbed its version the father of all bombs.
No one outside the regime has ever seen it. But if it really does exist, it could rewrite the rules of conventional war. Mama Bomb, prepare to meet Papa Bomb. The Soviet Union was America's last arch nemesis, a superpower with the firepower to match the U.S. toe-to-toe. Now, 3 decades after its fall, its sons and grandsons are plotting Russia's military resurrection.
The rise of Russia, the aggressive and assertive and belligerent way that Russia has acted is another huge challenge. It could potentially cause problems.
They have the largest number of weapons that can pose an existential threat to the United States.
I think there's a scenario with Russia and the United States that leads to a world war situation. NATO has expanded to the east. The Russians have real concerns about this. So there's the possibility in places like the Baltics or Romania, Poland, sort of new eastern frontier of NATO, this is directly touching Russia. You could imagine they might take certain actions they think are trying to bolster their own position.
The Russians know that to be the best, they'd have to beat the best.
Putin knows with certainty that if he were to engage with the United States military, he would be crushed. He knows that.
So they're spending heavily on new weapon systems intended to threaten American dominance.
Russia's armed forces are designed to counter the U.S. military. Are they competitive? You know, ultimately, the United States is still the preeminent military power in the world. That said, a conflict with Russia would be quite bloody.
5 months after the Moab blew a hole in the Afghan mountains, social media lit up with rumors that the Russians had dropped an even scarier air blast bomb in Syria. It's called the aviation thermobaric bomb of increased power, or in better English, the father of all bombs.
In the history of warfare, every enemy that wants to live to fight another day is going to adapt. You had the crossbow, and then what happened after the crossbow? The longbow. It gave you more distance, it gave you more accuracy. So it is totally conceivable that the mother of all bombs is going to have a father of all bombs as a competitor.
The FOAB is said to be 4 times more devastating than the MOAB, 44 tons of TNT compared to the MOAB's 11. And it yields a longer, hotter blast wave and double the impact radius. Yet, the FOAB manages to fit all that firepower into a smaller package. It's 6,000 pounds lighter than the MOAB. How? Basically, it's just a shell, loaded with explosive, oxygen-sucking fuel.
The FOAB is supposed to be what's called a fuel-air bomb or a thermobaric bomb, which is slightly different than your typical explosive. That has no oxygen or no oxidizer included as part of the weapon, so it uses oxygen from surrounding air. And if it's taking oxygen from the atmosphere, that leaves little oxygen for any survivors to breathe. If you're close, you're killed by the blast. If you're even within the region, you're still killed by asphyxiation. Not a fun way to go.
There are 2 key steps to a FOAB attack. First, a small charge busts open the bomb's shell to release a cloud of highly combustible mist into the air. Once that cloud spreads out to a certain diameter, a second set of charges ignite it into a massive fireball.
That's your big explosion that occurs. And all of this mixture and first detonation, second detonation happens within fractions of a second. It's very similar to what happens inside a rocket engine.
Let's get it set up as much as we can like it was before.
We got our Space Needle back, although it's suffered a little damage in the blast fire.
Now we're going to look at how a FOAB would work. This is going to be our thermobaric explosion. We're going to have one charge, send out our fuel and mix it with the oxygen in the air around us, and it's going to create a huge mist of fuel and air. And then we're going to set off another charge that ignites that. And when it does, we'll have a concussion and blast wave all at once in one big fireball. Now this is going to be a little more interesting because it's going to blow up here, right? I mean, and the cloud's going to be above or right at the top of the skyline.
Well, what's going to happen is the explosion will
And all of a
drop
sudden,
down.
boom, right?
Yeah.
The whole city gets hit by a hammer at once.
Yes, that would be it.
The FOAB is detonated at a higher altitude so that you can get this even homogeneous spread of the fuel-air mixture above the target area. Then you ignite that and you engage all of that energy onto the complete target area at once. I think this explosion is going to be a lot more exciting. I can't wait to see it. The rain's picked back up just in time. All right, we're ready to go.
Hot set! Hot set! In 3, 2, 1.
Wow!
There's maybe 50% more fuel in that than the original one, but there's a whole lot more flash over a whole lot more area.
So let's take a look at it on the high-speed camera. See how the cloud is spread out? It's all the way over the city. You're already everywhere you need to be. Then when you ignite it...
Now it erupts from the center. You can just start to see some parts of those rockets that are coming out that are igniting it, and that's to make sure we get to the edge of the cloud, and it's so white in the camera because it's so intense. There's no cool spots in that.
Just one big fireball at once, just boom. As opposed to with the MOAB, it's traveling through the alleyways and spreading out. Wasn't very efficient. And look how uniform it is too. It's just bright and uniform all the way in the city, everywhere at once. Before, we didn't get that at all. There were pockets burning here and there. There were spots where the diesel fuel was spread out through the alleyways. The structures are mostly still standing. You could move right in and take the city afterwards.
Except for the smell of gasoline,
which smells pretty bad. It does smell pretty bad here right now.
We decapitated a couple things.
We did.
Take a look at your Space Needle.
The Space Needle's gone.
It's sliced off like you broke it. It was right at the level.
Right, so the bomb blows up and that cloud slams right into the Space Needle and it broke it off. The FOAB was much more efficient at using up all of the fuel and air mixture and causing one big boom over the entire target area at once. So I think clearly this experiment shows us the FOAB is a much more effective weapon than the MOAB. If a real FOAB were dropped here, you certainly wouldn't want to be here. If the fuel slamming into you at 1,000 feet per second didn't get you, certainly when it ignited and sucked out all the oxygen and burned you up, it would. Now I think it's time to think about other things. What else can we blow up?
Well, that's a lot.
Yeah.
The real father of all bombs was supposedly first tested back in 2007, when the Russian government released this carefully edited test footage, declaring it now had a conventional weapon that has no match in the world. One official bragged that when the bomb explodes, all that is alive merely evaporates.
Russia wanted to have some claim to fame to the fact that they had a conventional weapon that had so much explosive power.
How much power? Let's pick on Seattle again. If you thought the Moab was rough on the home of grunge, Microsoft, and $5 coffee, wait till you see this. The FOAB's impact zone would be twice as wide and put everyone between the fish market and the football stadium in serious danger.
It's likely to do a little more structural damage. It's certainly, if it blows out the windows won't be enough to attenuate the blast wave and keep it from destroying more things inside the buildings. So likely, if you're inside the building, you won't be as protected as you were from the Moab.
Indeed, the FOAB would trump the Moab, if it really exists. But despite unconfirmed rumors that it was dropped in Syria in 2017, and the alleged test footage released a decade earlier, it seems no one outside of Russia is completely sure about that.
The Russians claim they have it. The Russians do that a lot, say they have something just to sort of spook us.
Still, just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean we can dismiss it. In the top secret world of superweaponry, details can be pretty hard to come by.
Those who talk don't know, and those who know won't talk, right?
What do you discuss and what do you not discuss? If you discuss something, it's a potential deterrent. A would-be adversary says, I don't want to mess with that. The other thing is the importance of giving commanders an element of surprise. There's a lot of stuff which we don't hear about, and that's by design. You obviously don't want to give away too much, but you also want to keep potential adversaries on notice that this is not something you want to go up against.
If the claims about the FOAB are true, Russia wins the battle of the air blast bombs hands down. But as both superpowers continue to sharpen their swords, their potential targets are strengthening their shields. Right now, some of the world's worst bad guys are burrowing deep underground, hatching nuclear plans and terror plots from ultra-fortified concrete command centers they hope are impossible to penetrate. But don't worry, there's a bomb for that. And it would eat the FOAB for breakfast.
Iran has been suspected of enriching uranium.
Iran's stockpile continues to grow.
Western governments are very suspicious that Iran is trying to build some kind of a nuclear weapon.
The bigger American bombs get, the deeper their targets burrow. And one of the most dangerous is deep beneath the sands of Iran. 300 feet below this desert missile base lies Iran's most impenetrable nuclear facility, heavily shielded behind blast-proof doors, hardened ceilings, and thick concrete walls. Officially, its purpose is to research nuclear power, but some fear the real objective is nuclear warheads that could decimate Israel, Europe, and even the United States.
Iran's nuclear program has not gone away despite the signing of the nuclear deal. That gave the Iranians the right to continue to do certain things, so they still have a nuclear program. It's constrained in ways that it wasn't before the deal, but it's still a thing, and many of those provisions in the nuclear deal have sunset clauses, so they'll go away after 10 to 15 years. This means that careful monitoring of the Iranian program is still necessary, and eventually there still may be a need to take military action depending on what the Iranians do.
Across Iran, an arsenal of missiles is being amassed in bunkers buried deep below mountains, like those seen in this official state video. One Iranian official warns, if the enemies make a mistake, missiles will erupt like a volcano from the depth of the earth.
The Iranian military is extremely capable. We see them operate constantly in the Arabian Gulf at sea. We see them operate in the air. We know a lot about their attempts to build a nuclear program. They are also purchasing weapons from North Korea. So Iran continues to be a very concerning foe.
Diplomats have been working overtime for years to rein in Iran's nuclear program. But if diplomacy fails and tensions heighten, it may be time to break out the heavy artillery. And the U.S. Air Force has just the right weapon for the job: the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, the MOP. It's America's biggest conventional bomb, 4 tons heavier than the mother of all bombs.
It is the granddaddy of all bunker busters. It's sort of almost opposite of how the Moab would work. If you set an explosive like the Moab or the FOAB off on top of such a shelter, all that's going to happen is the blast wave is going to be redirected and move across the top of the surface.
The Massive Ordnance Penetrator penetrates into the ground, and then it detonates to destroy anything inside of the ground. It just keeps going, and it will cut through that armor like a knife cutting through butter, and once inside, destroy everything.
The MOP is massive. It weighs 15 tons, so it can only be carried by the Air Force's largest stealth bomber, the B-2.
It is currently the largest weapon of its type that we know of in the world.
But maybe the most impressive thing about the Massive Ordnance Penetrator is how smart it is. It doesn't explode on impact. It delays its fuse while its super dense tip drives deep through hard rock and dense concrete.
It's specially constructed to fall from a very long distance, right, tens of thousands of feet, impact at speeds that could be in excess of the speed of sound, and yet not destroy itself, rather to penetrate through the earth or concrete, rock, what have you, and then detonate.
As soon as it hit an open space, which is presumably where your bad guys are, then it would explode.
The MOP can bust bunkers that previously only nukes could penetrate, giving the U.S. a massive bomb it can actually use without leaving a colossal cloud of radioactive fallout. But of course, the Iranians already know this, so they're doing everything they can to make their bunkers unbustable.
Evolution of military technology is a perpetual competition between the sword and the shield. Whenever someone builds a better sword, there's always somebody working on a better shield to handle that problem, right?
You talk about destroying targets, there are ways to harden targets. So that's been the continual race throughout human history, from the time that people built castles and then people built catapults and cannons to destroy those castles.
The Iranians are considered masters at making tougher concrete. They've had decades of practice engineering stronger buildings to withstand the country's violent earthquakes. So it's believed they're now outfitting their nuclear bunkers with some of the strongest concrete ever made, hoping to build a shield that America's 15-ton sword can't penetrate. The MOP can tear through 200 feet of 5,000 psi reinforced concrete, which is at the high end for standard building construction. But increase that psi to 10,000, and it can only drill down 25 feet. The Iranians are known to have made concrete up to 60,000 psi. So, the Pentagon is taking the MOP back into the shop, working on upgrades that will pierce through tougher material. The details are top secret. But in the meantime, there is a contingency plan. If a bunker is too deep or too dense for one existing MOP to penetrate, it can be hit with multiple bombs and target the arteries feeding the bunker.
Any buried facility will inevitably have some kind of ingress and egress. So this creates what I basically call the Death Star problem, right? So no matter how powerful the space station, there's the thermal exhaust port that you can target with proton torpedoes. No matter how deeply buried something is underground, you have to be able to get in and out of it. You have to be able to get power in and out of it. People down there have to be able to breathe. And so there's got to be an elevator down, there's got to be an air shaft down, et cetera. And these are going to be much easier to target.
One way or another, the objective is to take the nuke labs offline before they can hatch the nukes. Because once the warheads are on the launch pad, it's too late for a massive ordnance penetrator. There are 9 nuclear powers already locked and loaded. Iran could soon make it 10. And their ballistic missiles are getting smarter and faster all the time. If any of them go airborne, the United States will need a whole different set of superweapons designed to blow the nukes out of the sky.
We don't want to bring a knife to a gunfight. We want to take that gun out before it can be fired at us.
reports of another North Korean missile launch.
Kim Jong-un says more missile launches toward the Pacific. Many people around the world are frightened.
These days, the U.S. has no shortage of trigger-happy tyrants to contend with, which is why some of the latest superweapons are built not for offense, like the Moab or the MOP, but for defense, as a shield against the worst impulses of a rogue state.
The adversary that is the most unpredictable, irrational is North Korea.
This regime has told us again and again they intend to turn the United States into a sea of fire.
They don't operate in the world of nations. They don't operate in many cases in rational thought. So I think that's definitely one at the top of the list.
Unless something changes soon to derail North Korea's nuclear ambitions, America could be caught in the crosshairs.
The intelligence community assesses that the North probably has in excess of 20 nuclear bombs. We have to attribute to the North a capability of reaching our shores. The rest of the question is, can they miniaturize a nuke and can they put a nuke on top of one of those ICBMs?
Should there be a surprise attack, we've got to be able to defeat that missile. We have to create layers of defense against this. And then, of course, we can always counterattack later. The North Koreans have to know that an attack on the United States of America would be met with a catastrophic and overwhelming counterattack.
America's nukes are bigger, badder, and far more numerous than North Korea's. So, the outcome of any missile exchange is a foregone conclusion. Spoiler alert, North Korea loses. But the bigger concern for the United States is, what about the nukes that do get launched in its direction? Can there be any guarantee that none of them will strike American soil? Short answer, no. Longer answer, the Pentagon is working on it. And there are some staggering new missile defense systems already patrolling American skies. Right now, this is America's frontline defense against inbound missiles. The Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, otherwise known as THAAD.
All right, dropped away. We got ignition.
THAAD can strike targets up to 125 miles from its launch site and up to 93 miles above the Earth. That's about 6 times higher and 3 times farther than the Patriot missile system, which was our antidote to Saddam's Scud missiles during the Gulf War. Each THAAD system carries up to 8 missiles that can be deployed at once against multiple targets. But they don't carry their own explosives, because blowing up a nuke, especially over your own territory, isn't the brightest idea. The goal is to neutralize the ICBM without detonating its warhead, by either breaking it up or redirecting it. And the best way to do that is to hit it with a non-exploding projectile, basically a massive bullet.
We're talking about hitting a bullet with a bullet, and that's hard to do. Big sky, a little target. You have to be able to project exactly where it's going to be.
These systems use extremely advanced radar to find the incoming target, to track the incoming target. Then you have a very complex computer system that understands how to predict where that missile is going, and then it launches the intercept missile and controls it and guides it into that missile.
The radar system that guides THAAD to the target is so accurate that it can spot a baseball hit out of a stadium from hundreds of miles away and tell a player exactly where to stand to catch it. And it has enough range to scan areas the size of entire countries simultaneously. Once that radar locks onto an incoming missile and calculates its trajectory, the THAAD is unleashed. Multiple THAAD systems have been deployed to hotspots around the Pacific Rim, giving America an unprecedented shield against enemy missiles. But still, no guarantees.
There's, I think, an idea that we could hit any missile that's coming up any spot in the sky at any time. That's not necessarily the case.
Any missile defense system, even THAAD, can be saturated. It only has a certain number of interceptors, and once those interceptors are used, then the system no longer works.
A lot of missiles have more than one warhead. It can have 4, 5, 6, maybe even 10 warheads, and they pop out, and now you've got multiple targets that you would have to shoot. You could still shoot them there, but you got to shoot a bunch of them instead of just one. And they also have decoys, so you don't know which one is the real warhead and which one is a fake.
They're just coming in so fast. They're hard to hit. Most interceptor systems will intercept a missile in its terminal phase when it's plunging down onto a target. New systems are being designed that will hopefully get to the ICBM while it's still in space.
A space-based missile interceptor would be the only surefire way to avoid Armageddon. It's an idea that's been around a long time, but it's not just an idea anymore. Because after decades of dreaming, space-age science fiction is now becoming science fact.
I don't think Star Wars is that far from reality. I mean, it's not just on the horizon, it's already here.
Operation Alert, a realistic rehearsal for an atomic attack, was the biggest nationwide air raid drill ever attempted. Military personnel emptied out of the Pentagon, while at the same time, State Department employees joined Americans from coast to coast in taking cover against the mythical assault. The pulse of the nation stood still.
Not since the Cold War has the threat of nuclear annihilation loomed so large. North Korea, Iran, India, and Pakistan are all rattling their nuclear sabers and pushing other major powers to upgrade their defensive shields. America's newest ground-based missile interceptors are more advanced than ever, but they still have some frightening limitations.
We've been very successful with our ballistic missile defense technologies thus far. But to be clear, we have not been 100% successful.
The THAAD system targets missiles in the final phase of their path, the terminal phase, when they're hurtling towards Earth. That's extremely risky. Miss it then, and it's lights out. So the U.S. is developing a new superweapon that can do something much tougher. Hit the nukes while they're hurtling through space. This is the missile-destroying megaweapon of the future. The Exo-Atmospheric Kill Vehicle, a lethal projectile shot into space that can catch and kill an ICBM long before it strikes.
There are 3 phases of a ballistic missile's trajectory. There's the boost phase, the mid-course phase, and the terminal phase. The mid-course phase occurs in space.
That's the most likely time to hit it with an interceptor missile. So you would launch your missile as soon as you know the original missile's launched, and hopefully you can meet them in space. So an exo-atmospheric kill vehicle would have rocket systems on it that can guide it, steer it, move it, propel it, and as it sees the missile moving, steering, it's going to try and keep up with it and target it and steer right into it.
There are more than 40 kill vehicles ready for launch from bases in Alaska and California. If ever an enemy missile threatens America, the kill vehicle will hitch a ride into space on a massive 24-ton missile as long as a train car, which will accelerate it to 15,000 miles per hour and then cut it loose to do its business.
It's in space at this point, about 1,000 miles high. Space is really big, and these targets are really small, and this really is like shooting a bullet with a bullet. That's how difficult it is. And now imagine that your bullet could maneuver, and you still have to hit it. That makes it even more difficult.
The newest generation of ICBMs in Russia and China are able to dodge and weave, but so can the Exo-Atmospheric Kill Vehicle. It has autonomous steering capability that would set the stage for an intergalactic game of cat and mouse. If the kill vehicle catches its prey before it re-enters the atmosphere, it's game over.
They just destroy the ICBM by the sheer force of impact.
It has the impact of a Mack truck traveling at enormous speeds.
Ironically, the idea behind this space-based missile destroyer was originally proposed by the same guy who invented the H-bomb in the first place.
There was an idea by Teller, the father of the hydrogen bomb. It was called Brilliant Pebbles. And the idea he had was to put satellites in space that were little guided munitions already in orbit, so that if someone launched an ICBM, you would fly this cloud of these missiles in the direction, and hopefully one of them could steer into it and hit it.
Edward Teller's idea sounded like science fiction, and it soon caught the attention of the world's most prominent sci-fi fan.
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
Ronald Reagan grew up reading the otherworldly adventure novels of Edgar Rice Burroughs. And when he became president, he announced a new space-based missile defense initiative that would lay the groundwork for the exo-atmosphere kill vehicle.
My fellow Americans, tonight we're launching an effort which holds the promise of changing the course of human history.
The press dubbed it Star Wars.
During the Cold War era, Ronald Reagan suggested that he wanted all the scientists of the country and the Allied nations to come together and develop a system, a strategic defense initiative that could destroy incoming intercontinental ballistic missiles using technologies like missile interceptors, but also things like particle beam weapons, directed energy weapons, which also means lasers, that could shoot these down and create sort of a dome of protection over the country.
The Star Wars program was phased out in the early 1990s, but the Pentagon's Missile Defense Agency is its direct descendant, and the exo-atmospheric kill vehicle is engineered with the same goal in mind: to build a better shield against the nuclear sword. But space isn't only a place to play defense. Science fiction has also cooked up some terrifying ways to leverage the offensive potential of the final frontier. And now, weapons engineers are turning those ideas into reality. From orbiting arsenals to intergalactic death rays.
That's cool. Go big or go home, man.
Yeah, that's it.
The battlefields of the future may extend far beyond our skies, and those who master space weapons will be masters of the universe.
Just imagine a power pole-sized piece of tungsten carbide falling from orbit, smacking into the ground. Imagine how much damage that could do.
Get ready for the rod from God. Will the superbombs of the future be launched from outer space? In 1967, at the peak of the space race, the world's leading nations agreed not to let that happen. When they signed the Outer Space Treaty, banning space-based nukes forever. But it didn't say anything about this. Behold, the rods from God. A space-based arsenal of superbombs that acts solely on speed and mass. No explosives required.
The first weapons were kinetic energy weapons. When the first caveman threw a rock at another caveman, that was a kinetic energy weapon. So were cannon shells, so were bullets.
A purely kinetic energy weapon can be as devastating as an explosive and more. A perfect example is the Chicxulub meteor that killed all the dinosaurs. That thing hit the Earth and created the Gulf of Mexico. So that was purely kinetic, and it was much more devastating than any nuclear weapon.
Picture a massive bullet, the size of a telephone pole, being fired from space. It would reach dizzying speeds by the time it hits Earth and obliterate its target with astonishing force.
You get an enormous amount of kinetic energy coming from that height. And of course, if it's a solid chunk, you don't have to worry about the stresses of reentry as much. Things heat up a lot, they come into the environment. If you're talking about a missile warhead, that's enormously challenging to get that to work. If you're talking about, a 1-ton chunk of tungsten, it's a lot easier and you can still do a lot of damage to the target.
Space-based kinetic weapons aren't a reality yet, but they're getting more realistic by the day. The concept dates back to the 1950s and an idea called Project Thor. It envisioned long, thin tungsten rods being fired several hundred miles above Earth and accelerating up to 32 times the speed of sound by the time of impact. And they could potentially penetrate so deep into the ground they'd make the massive ordnance penetrator seem like a party snap. But just how deep? Dr. Travis Taylor has a small experiment in mind that can be magnified to a cosmic scale.
To penetrate an object with purely kinetic energy, you need two things. You need speed and an extremely hard material, and that's what I have right here. This is an armor-piercing round. It has a tungsten carbide penetrator inside the bullet, and I'm gonna fire that at this block. This is 3 inches of steel-reinforced concrete. So I'm gonna go load this up, fire it, and see if we can penetrate through the block. This is a PTR 91 308 caliber, based on the HK G3 legendary battle rifle. Let's see if this round will penetrate that concrete. Made a big divot. Let's see if it went all the way through. Oh yeah, here we go. Here's the hole. Oh yeah, it went all the way through. Wow. This was a little tungsten carbide penetrator bullet. Made it through 3 inches of steel reinforced concrete. Now just imagine, like the rods from God example, where you had a power pole sized piece of tungsten carbide falling from orbit, smacking into the ground. Imagine how much damage that could do and how deep it might could penetrate the earth.
Travis's armor-piercing round weighs about 1/3 of an ounce. The rod from God envisioned by Project Thor would be about 850,000 times bigger. And it would impact the Earth at almost 4 times the speed. That means it would have about 12 million times as much energy on impact. So if a tungsten-tipped bullet can penetrate a few inches of steel-reinforced concrete, a real-life rod from God could blast through almost 3 miles of hard ground. Project Thor never made it past the drawing board. 6 decades later, there are still major political and technological hurdles to overcome before the US can put a superbomb like this in space. But down here on Earth, high-powered kinetic weaponry is already within our grasp, and it could soon be coming to a battleship near you. In July of 2017, the US fired multiple rounds from a massive cannon powered solely by electromagnetic pulses. It's called a railgun because it relies on 2 parallel conductors, or rails, to carry a current that propels the projectile at incredible speeds. Its rounds are real-life versions of the rods from God. Heavy metal mini-missiles that can hit pinpoint targets up to 100 miles away at 5,000 miles an hour.
Electrical charges move those projectiles at enormous distances and with even more accuracy. So it's a quantum improvement in our ability to project power ashore and at sea.
Railguns will soon start replacing rocket-propelled weapons on the Navy's latest stealth destroyers. And they represent a prevailing trend in weapons technology: precision over size.
Size does not always matter when it comes to weapon systems. In some cases, what we want to do is very surgical. We want to kill an individual or a small group while minimizing the damage that we do to the surrounding area.
The US Navy's railgun is the world's latest and greatest kinetic energy weapon. But smaller ones have been part of America's arsenal for decades. In Vietnam, the Air Force dropped thousands of so-called lazy dog bombs on enemy troops hidden under jungle canopy. They would free fall up to 500 miles per hour and strike with 3 times the force of an air blast bomb.
Imagine you're sitting in your car and you accelerate to 5 miles an hour and hit a concrete wall. You'll be shaken, but you'll be fine, your car will be fine, and the wall will certainly be fine. Now imagine accelerating to 500 miles an hour. You hit that wall, there'll be little left of your car, and for that matter, not much left of the wall. Now imagine accelerating to 5,000 miles an hour. Now you see the destructive potential of hypervelocity weapons.
While the Navy harnesses the power of kinetic energy projectiles at sea, the Army is looking to them on land as a potential sword to counter one of Russia's strongest new shields. The T-14 Armata tank, which the Russian military claims is the toughest ever made. But while its armor is formidable and its speed staggering, America's latest kinetic energy weapons could be its kryptonite.
Fired at an exceptionally high rate of speed, it's able to penetrate the armor of a tank just by being hard and fast and pointy. So it slices through the armor, and once inside the tank, creates what we call spall. The uranium itself at this point has become molten because of the speed and friction of having to penetrate the armor, and then it flies around inside the tank and kills everyone inside of it.
Kinetic weapons demonstrate just how deadly a combination of sheer speed and mass can be. But imagine adding explosive warheads to larger missiles that can go even faster. Now, you've got the definition of a superbomb. That's not science fiction, it's real. But here's the bad news. It's made in China. It's engineered to target American aircraft carriers. And right now, there may be no way to stop it.
You have a really big problem. You have no warning. No warning is extremely dangerous.
Brace yourself for the carrier killer.
American steel and American hands have constructed a 100,000-ton message to the world.
In July of 2017, the United States introduced the most technologically advanced aircraft carrier ever built, the USS Gerald Ford. It's been touted as the greatest war machine on the planet, but some military analysts think it could be a sitting duck.
The Chinese now claim that they have a hypersonic missile that can destroy aircraft carriers, and that's alarming to some. It scares the hell out of me.
According to reports, this missile's official name is the DF-21D, but it's known as the carrier killer.
In Chinese history, there's something called the assassin's mace. And the assassin's mace was a response to a longer sword. It's basically a little mace that they carried under the sleeve of their arm, and they used to smash the sword. So it turned your advantage into a disadvantage. Think about the parallels of how China, for example, has been looking at key US military strengths, aircraft carriers. China has said, those are your advantages. I'm gonna turn those into your disadvantages. Instead of avoiding your carriers, what if I could take away your carriers?
In the world of super weaponry, size and precision are key, but so is speed. China's carrier killer missile has all of these things. It's hypersonic, meaning it can fly more than 5 times the speed of sound, maybe even 10. By comparison, a bullet typically travels at just 2 times the speed of sound.
The speed of sound is at Mach 1. Mach 1 is around 767 miles per hour. It's pretty fast to start with. So between Mach 1 and Mach 5 is in the supersonic regime. Then beyond that, anything moving over Mach 5, that's 5 times the speed of sound, then that's going to be hypersonic.
5 times the speed of sound is essentially a mile per second. You can think of flying from Washington, D.C. to Atlanta in less than 10 minutes. So it's very, very fast flight.
Now imagine going Mach 20, so 4 times that. You're talking nearly 16,000 miles per hour.
Hypersonic missiles like the carrier killer threaten to revolutionize warfare by ending the battle before it even begins. How do you defend against an attack you can't even see coming?
Throughout military history, speed has always been crucial to victory. We can see that playing out in everything from World War II and the German Blitzkrieg to modern air war campaigns. When we look at the technologies that are out there today, one of the crucial elements of them is how they take speed and move it to almost inhuman levels.
We are very concerned about hypersonic missiles. Let's face it, an aircraft carrier is hard to hide, no matter how you shape it.
We have a problem detecting the launch of even weapons that are not hypersonic. Add to that hypersonic capability, and you now have a really big problem. You have no warning. No warning is extremely dangerous, and it makes it very easy for there to be a mistake made.
It's been reported that the DF-21D could sink an American aircraft carrier in a single shot. This aerial photo shows a test firing in the Gobi Desert, striking at the heart of a carrier-sized target. The DF-21D can supposedly reach Mach 10 and target ships more than 1,200 miles from China's coast, making it extremely dangerous for America's Pacific Fleet to venture close. And there are fears that it can even dodge and weave around America's missile defenses.
Does it live up to that hype? It's really hard to tell. You know, China has actually never tested the DF-21D over the water against an uncooperative target. So we're not actually sure how capable they are. That being said, given our knowledge about that technology, there's enough there to suggest that they could be successful.
It's believed the carrier killer relies on boost glide technology to reach hyperspeed. Basically, it combines a rocket booster with good old-fashioned gravity.
It's launched into space, but then as it reaches space, it quickly separates from the booster, and the booster falls away, and then it quickly descends back to the upper edges of the atmosphere, and it flies or glides along the upper edge of the atmosphere at hypersonic speeds. It not only glides, but it maneuvers. The maneuvering allows it to keep its target essentially a secret until the very last seconds of its flight.
They turn and dive into the atmosphere, and it's that trajectory almost straight down, and then they accelerate tremendously toward the target. An example, while it's not hypersonic, is if you look at birds of prey, they will fly way up high and then tuck and dive straight down toward the target. When they get to where the target are, then they will flare and use that speed to chase something. It's the same idea.
China may appear to be winning the warp speed weapons race, but the U.S. is still in it to win it. And it's drawing on the combined brainpower of multiple military branches to trump the carrier killer. In 2010, the Air Force successfully tested its first unmanned hypersonic aircraft, the X-51 Wave Rider. Now, it's working on a weaponized version, the high-speed strike missile, which will roll out in the mid-2020s. The Army also has a horse in the race, a system called the Advanced Hypersonic Weapon. It's a long-range missile that can fly coast to coast in less than a half hour. And DARPA, the Pentagon's advanced research agency, has one that could soon hit any target on Earth in under an hour. So the hypersonic cavalry is coming. But in the meantime, the U.S. needs to invent a new shield that can stop these missiles before another superpower lets one fly.
We need systems that can shoot down a missile of that size and can actually target it. That's the key. Targeting something that's moving at hypersonic velocity is almost impossible. I say we need to come up with something else.
Oh, wow.
Go big or go home, man.
The U.S. Navy has been thinking the same thing, and it's working on a top-secret weapon system straight out of sci-fi that could soon run circles around hypersonic missiles and render all other superweapons obsolete.
It's unbelievably precise. It is capable against the highest speed weapons. Nothing moves faster than light.
What's fast enough to stop a hypersonic carrier killer? A light-speed laser weapon. And believe it or not, a real-life version of this sci-fi classic is already part of America's arsenal. It's called LAWS, short for Laser Weapons System, and it's been deployed to the Persian Gulf aboard the amphibious transport ship USS Ponce. LAWS concentrates the energy equivalent of 300 light bulbs into one beam. That's powerful enough to take out low-flying drones and dismantle the engines of small boats nearby. Not exactly an interplanetary death ray, but it's a start.
It's not just the scientists who are inspired by science fiction. It's also people in government, in military, in industry who pay for these technologies. I remember speaking with a US military officer who said, you know, one of the best ways to sell something was to say, it's just like in Star Trek, or it's just like in Star Wars. If you can point to it from science fiction, you know, it seems like it's part of the future.
A light-speed laser weapon could be just the thing to neutralize China's carrier killer before it strikes. Just point, shoot, and destroy.
Just point at it and shoot it instantly at the speed of light. That's the most likely way to engage it. This is how lasers work. They take light energy and keep it in a single coherent beam so that all the light travels in one direction and hits the target. It's like when you use a magnifying glass to burn through paper or whatever, you've got a bunch of light in a tiny spot. And that is actually transferring the energy of the light into the target. And it's that heat transfer that causes damage.
Alrighty, here's our lasers.
Wow, this is cool.
To demonstrate how a future laser weapon could work, Dr. Taylor and pyrotechnician Bogdan Bushel are setting up a small-scale demo.
So we took some rock and roll style lasers and we're gonna turn them into a more destructive element.
What if sometime in the future North Korea launched an intercontinental ballistic missile at us, an ICBM? What would we do? Well, today, the only thing we could do is launch another missile at that missile, and hopefully we'd hit it and destroy it. But hopefully sometime in the future, we might have a laser system that could actually point laser beams at the incoming ICBM and shoot it down. That's what we're gonna demonstrate here. We actually have 8 concert level lasers. Now these lasers are fairly dangerous. Each one is 10 watts. They would blind you instantly if you were to be hit in the eye with them. And when all focused down on a single target, they should be able to burn through our simulated missile skin. So we're gonna simulate that with putting fuel inside our simulated ICBM. We're gonna focus each of these 8 laser beams down onto the target, and then hopefully it'll be enough energy to burn through the skin and detonate the fuel. So this is our control system?
Yep, we've got each of the individual lasers is plugged into a computer here. The computer controls the parameters, intensity, size of spot, all of that.
Well, then let's get this thing going.
Okay, let's go. Okay, so now he's just trying to focus them on the first stage.
Yeah, no, that's a good spot.
If it's hard to do this with a model rocket that's hanging from a beam, imagine how you're trying to do it flying through space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it was easy, everybody would do it. Imagine in real life what would happen. Somebody launches an intercontinental ballistic missile. From the time it's launched to the time it hits the target is less than 32 minutes. Now this rocket's moving at, say, 5 times the speed of sound, maybe more. How quickly can we track that? How accurately can we track that and put all of these laser beams at the exact spot on the rocket that we need to in order for it to go kaboom? When the lasers engage the intercontinental ballistic missile, they don't want to engage up at the top where the nuclear warhead is. That's this nose cone part up here. We want to engage down where the rocket fuel is so that the rocket itself will blow up and the warhead will fall inert to the ground instead of exploding and destroying the city. Okay, he turned the brightness up because the beams are more powerful now. Yeah, it's definitely brighter now. All right, well, so let's don't look at that anymore, and nobody in the crew or anybody else look that way any longer, because just looking at the spot, not the beams hitting you in the eye, just looking at the spot is 40 times what's safe to look at. Meaning it will burn your retina and you will be blind. So we're gonna look at it in a monitor where we're safe.
These lasers are outputting a combined strength of 80 watts of power. That's enough to blind anyone, and it should be enough to burn through the model's thin plastic skin. But penetrating an aluminum shell on a real ICBM could take up to 36,000 watts. That's 450 times stronger.
It's getting real bright.
And it's coming in super intense. And you're gonna just leave it there until it smokes.
I thought I saw some smoke in the beam. Oh yeah, we got a spot burning. Oh wow. Oh, we got smoke now. Look at the smoke pouring off of it.
All right, so we're now burning through the skin of our model rocket.
Yeah, it's got to blow any time now.
Right, as soon as it gets through that skin to the fuel.
See how long this is taking, and that's plastic, right?
Yep.
So it may take some amount of time to burn through a real ICBM.
We're 30 seconds in, and still no explosion. For real-world laser weapons to be practical, they'd need to burn through an ICBM in a matter of milliseconds. Because when they're traveling at Mach 10 and able to maneuver, they'd be almost impossible to lock onto for much longer than that.
Right here is the nuclear tipped nose cone. It's flying away. We destroyed the rest of the rocket. That's exactly what we want to see. That's cool. And loud. Go big or go home, man.
Yeah, that's it.
The really cool part is the rocket part is what was destroyed, and the nose cone that would have held the nuclear weapon was thrown away from the blast to safety without detonating. And that's exactly what we'd want to do, is we'd want to destroy the rocket and not trigger the nuclear device. Hopefully someday in the future, we'll actually have a real system that can do this with real ICBMs.
Light energy has always been there for the taking. It's just a matter of figuring out how to harness it on a massive military scale. Because let's face it, burning through a hypersonic ICBM is a bit different than lighting a piece of paper on fire.
It takes a lot of energy to knock out a missile, and figuring out how to make a laser to create enough energy to burn through steel and other materials that aircraft and missiles are made of is difficult. You need a huge power source to create a devastating laser beam.
The United States military has been working on laser weapons for almost 40 years. The project first gained worldwide attention in 1983, when President Reagan greenlit the Star Wars program, which called for X-ray lasers and subatomic particle beams to be fired from land and space. 2 years later, the U.S. Navy developed the most powerful laser in the world, the mid-infrared advanced chemical laser, known as the Miracle.
It's a huge laser the size of about 2 basketball gymnasiums out in the desert, and they launched a missile and shot it down. That was the biggest laser we've ever built, and that has actually been tested.
Once the Miracle proved that laser missile defense is possible, the Pentagon started working on more practical ways to bring it onto the battlefield.
A lot of early attempts at practical laser weapons were quite powerful, but they were basically chemical lasers, which can give you quite a lot of power, but the problem is you have a finite supply of fuel because it's an actual chemical reaction that helps make the lasing happen.
Chemical lasers require a full-size trailer to hold their fuel. That makes them tough to move around and even tougher to conceal. So the Navy got to work on a next-generation laser weapon that could run on electric power. That is the weapon that came to be known as LAWS. And in 2014, it made its debut. LAWS was a giant leap forward from the massive and inefficient chemical lasers that preceded it. But there's still one hurdle it can't overcome.
Currently, one of the big problems with laser weapon systems is firing the system through clouds, through rain, and through fog and smoke. Heavy overcast sky really makes lasers much less effective on the targets on the other side of those clouds. You would need to invent some clever way to make a hole in the cloud so you could shoot through it, or to invent a laser that clouds have no effect on.
Despite the atmospheric obstacles, the Navy is doubling down on laser research, aiming to add a lot more power without sacrificing mobility. And it's about to unveil a new weapon 5 times stronger than the current LAWS system, capable of zapping cruise missiles and aircraft out of the sky. That weapon is still top secret, and the Pentagon is being extremely tight-lipped about its details.
We're moving rapidly on this. I think that may be the real future against hypersonics, against ballistic missiles once they're at very high speed descending or even in the ascent phase.
Every generation of laser weapons is moving us closer to the imaginary realm of H.G. Wells and Ronald Reagan. And as we work to make lasers more effective down here on Earth, another frontier anxiously awaits.
Since we're using satellites for intelligence gathering and communications, it's completely reasonable that in the next conflict, lasers will be used to blind intel satellites.
One day, decades from now, space lasers may be the ultimate superweapons, capable of vaporizing satellites, missiles, and even whole cities with a single beam. But lasers may not be the answer to every offensive threat. In fact, there's one set of future weapons that could be nearly impossible for them to stop. It's like a flying, weaponized school of fish that finds strength in numbers. And it's straight out of your worst sci-fi nightmare.
Drones, and particularly swarms of drones, would keep me up at night.
What's worse? Being blown to bits by a 30,000-pound missile? Or being swarmed by thousands of tiny bombs primed to blow at the same time? Brace yourself for a sci-fi nightmare that may soon come true. The attack of the mini drones.
Say like a swarm of bees attacks. When you swat at one bee, you only kill one bee. There's still 100 of them still stinging you, right? It's a great idea. Send a swarm at your target.
The Pentagon agrees, and it has multiple mini-drone programs in the works that could soon yield the most unexpected set of super weapons the world has ever seen.
One scenario that this technology is being envisioned for is naval war of the future, where you might have an enemy fleet that's somewhere. You don't know where it is. Instead of sending out one manned system or one drone to find it, you send out a swarm. They go widely. Then they convert from search drones into attack missiles and swarm the target and take it out.
These drones are part of the Navy's Locust program, which stands for Low-Cost UAV Swarm Technology. They're shot from a launcher with their wings and tails folded. Once airborne, they snap into position and can accelerate to 90 miles an hour. Each launcher can fire up to 30 drones a minute, and they're all in constant contact with each other. So they share one brain, one mission, and they never collide on the way. Meanwhile, a top-secret Pentagon unit called the Strategic Capabilities Office is hatching its own plans for the perfect swarm.
All vehicles up and away.
These are the Perdix drones, named for a character in Greek mythology who was transformed into a bird. They're smaller than their locust cousins, but they can travel in bigger groups. When they were tested in 2016, more than 100 were dropped from fighter jets, met up at a pre-selected point in the sky, and then set out on a series of joint missions. As smart bombs go, these things are tiny, with wingspans just a foot across, but collectively, they can do a lot of damage.
It's much harder to defend against a swarm of drones than a single plane carrying a massive bomb. There's too many for the enemy's air defenses to shoot down.
If you had 1,000 drones with warheads and you drove the drones into strategic targets, you might create more damage. You would certainly create more terror with an attack like that.
ISIS terrorists have recently started flying consumer-grade drones over crowds and dropping grenades from them. Those attacks, while horrifying, are limited in scope. But if swarm drone technology falls into the wrong hands, the consequences could be catastrophic. These clusters of micro-missiles are capable of packing a powerful explosive punch. But their most unsettling feature isn't their lethality, it's their intelligence. Drone swarms could spy on enemies, jam their communications, and spoof their radars by pretending to be much larger targets. like bombers and fighter jets. But they could also be programmed to kill on their own, and that opens up a Pandora's box of potential dangers.
Do you authorize it to shoot on its own or not? Do you say, don't take out the enemy until I, the human, tell you? Or do you say, when you come across something that looks like an enemy destroyer, go ahead and take it out?
The rapid advancement of autonomous drones is raising hard questions that apply across the wider spectrum of superweapons. Should we ever let machines decide the fate of men?
The problem is human beings have a broader ability to interpret sort of the context than a lot of artificial intelligence systems do, at least at present. So what if you have one of these surface-to-air missile radars, but it's sitting on top of a kindergarten? A human being that was able to see the entire context would say, probably shouldn't take that shot. A very simple artificial intelligence might not.
This is not a futuristic issue. It's something that we're wrestling with right now. So the kind of debates that we had at science fiction conventions a generation ago, should a robot be allowed to kill on its own? Military professionals, international lawyers, governments are trying to figure out right now.
The ultimate fear is Skynet, right, from Terminator, which decides, well, the way to solve this problem of nuclear war is to just go ahead and have it and get rid of humans. I think we're a long way from that kind of situation. But as you might imagine, if one side starts to pursue these kind of systems because it thinks there's a real advantage, it will inevitably put pressure on the other side to try and pursue it.
America isn't the only player in the game of drones. The Chinese are also angling to become a swarm superpower. They flew 119 drones at once in the summer of 2017. And there are reports they're now testing mass swarms that could be armed with explosives. So if China gives its drones the power to make their own choices in battle, should the United States?
Right now, the U.S. military will absolutely not ever let a machine make the decision to end a human life. But other countries may make the decision for us. If they start allowing their drones to kill our soldiers or destroy our targets in a conflict, we may be forced to follow suit.
There's always a chain of command of people involved before the authorization is given to do such a thing. So we're never going to let a computer make that choice. It's against the law, actually. It would be a war crime. But just because something's against the law doesn't mean that somebody won't do it.
Sci-fi storytellers have long envisioned the human race being conquered by its own machines, and drone swarms certainly seem like a step in that direction. In the perpetual battle between sword and shield, mankind may one day find itself playing defense against its own inventions. But in the future, our most lethal weapon may be nothing like the killer machines seen in the movies.
The opening round of the next World War will likely be silent.
The ultimate weapon of mass destruction is all around us and potentially accessible to any rogue regime. Because you don't need to build your own massive warheads to destroy the world. You just need to be able to control them. Ever since the last shot was fired in World War II, the planet has been bracing itself for World War III. Somehow, we've managed to avoid Armageddon for the past 70+ years. But if history is any guide, there's always another storm on the horizon. And when it comes, will humanity be able to survive its own terrifying inventions? Enemy superpowers are now armed to the teeth with an array of weapons they won't hesitate to use. But perhaps the most lethal of them all is invisible and readily accessible around the globe.
In a World War III, we'd see battles in this domain that literally didn't exist a generation ago, cyberspace. Who wins in cyberspace could determine the winners of battles on the land, the air, and the sea.
The weapons of offensive cyber are beginning to approach the effect of a weapon of mass destruction, particularly in the ability of cyber to attack our electric grid, or for us to attack another nation's electric grid. A cyber attack could include launching a nuclear weapon, and thus you combine two weapons of mass destruction together. Cyber is an entire spectrum of threat that runs from espionage that reveals our most classified military systems to inserting cyber code in a way that causes the destruction of a ship or causes a plane to crash.
Computer hackers are leveling the battlefield by exploiting the power of online networks to wreak havoc in the real world. And any weapon connected to one of these networks could be vulnerable, from massive ICBMs to mini drones.
They're vulnerable to the same kind of cyber or interference that bedevils any network. So what you might have is a very powerful tool, but if the adversary is aware of it, they might be able to jam all of the communications, which makes it much less effective as a whole.
Cyber war can be waged by anyone, anywhere, empowering unseen enemies in Earth's darkest corners to do serious damage.
I think the most dangerous aspect of the Islamic State is, over time, going to be their ability to obtain hackers who can come after our infrastructure, come after our financial networks, come after our electric grid. Very, very worrisome.
The U.S. has its own army of cyber warriors working to gain the upper hand online. There are unsubstantiated rumors that they've launched top-secret cyber attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities and North Korean missile tests. And their role in future wars will only escalate as military systems get more interconnected.
You've gone from, say, 3 domains 60 years ago, air, land, and sea, to now you have air, land, sea, space, and cyberspace. Warfighting will take place in all of these domains simultaneously in many future conflicts.
But as pervasive as the cyber domain is becoming, the balance of power will always tip toward the nations best equipped to conquer solid ground.
There are 3 superpowers on the planet: the United States, the Russians, and the Chinese. They have extremely large arsenals of weapons that can do a lot of damage. So if there's going to be devastation that's global, that has an impact on everybody, it's going to be because of one of the superpowers.
There's no doubt Russia and China are building impressive arsenals that could pose a threat to the United States. But America has more practice using its weapons than any other power on the planet. And if a world war breaks out, that experience could be a key advantage.
We've been out there conducting operations for a long time. So I think one of the things when you look at claims that other people make, you have to be cognizant of how much experience they have in really doing what they claim they can do.
If you look back to how we fought, let's just pick, the Second Gulf War. We fought with utter, overwhelming force. We brought air, ground, sea, cruise missiles, everything together at once, and rapidly overwhelmed and defeated Saddam Hussein, really with minimal casualties to American forces. I mean, it was a textbook battle. That wouldn't happen if we were going to fight the Chinese or if we were going to fight the Russians. They're too strong.
Luckily, there are no signs that the big 3 are going to attack each other anytime soon. But there's always a risk that outside influences could draw them in on opposing sides.
The greatest potential for global war really still remains miscalculation. Fear and honor, and in some cases self-interest, are what trigger war. We've learned that since the Peloponnesian Wars. And this remains a threat today. As we saw in World War I, often the dominoes fall very rapidly, and a local conflict can rapidly escalate into a global conflagration.
There are multiple flashpoints that could ignite World War III. From the Korean Peninsula to the Middle East and the India-Pakistan border. And with so many superbombs ready for launch, the consequences could be unfathomably brutal. Whenever it comes, World War III will look very different from the first 2. Our staggering advances in weapons technology guarantee it. But technology itself doesn't win wars, no matter how good it gets. Robots didn't cross the Rubicon, the Delaware, or the English Channel. soldiers did.
At the end of the day, technology matters, but ultimately our security depends on young men and women who are willing to defend the country. If we don't have the human capital to utilize this technology, we have no security.
On Okinawa, for example, we poured Avogadro's number of tons of conventional weapons on top of that place and still had a fight to the death. Yes, they're more accurate, and yes, they're bigger, but at the end of the day, some young soldier with a bayonet is going to have to seize and/or hold the terrain, and no number of mother-of-all bombs is going to change that.